jump in. I just wanted to feel how everybody's doing. So let's just do two really quick polls. Let's start with this one. How are you feeling today? Okay. It's kind of an equal balance between the tired and calm. Whoever is excited, you'll help the tired people out. We'll bring the energy together. Thanks for that. Let's do one more. This is kind of like a divider of the room. I'm always curious. And I run this all the time and I want to find out why, yet we won't have a chance to discuss why, but let's go. Would you rather travel back in time to meet your ancestors or into the future to meet your descendants? Kind of an equal split. I want to know why though, but yes, maybe in the chat. If anybody feels like sharing, let me know. I'm super curious. All right, great, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Let's do quick intros. There aren't that many of us. I think it will be quick intros. I would love to, if you could just introduce yourself, introduce your organization, and maybe in just one line, what your organization does. That would be helpful. So perhaps we can start with Joel that I'm seeing here. It's the first person I'm seeing.
Hi, everyone. Some familiar faces now that we're into sort of like the fourth or fifth session. My name is Joel Rush. I work for the Centre for Climate Crime Analysis. The organisation, in a nutshell, works with partners to prosecute climate crime globally and at the national levels.
Nice. Welcome, Joel. Let's have Alex.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Ryan. I work with Active Asia and we train mostly climate and energy activists in Asia in campaign strategy, community organising and other tools so that they can resist and fight injustice and win and build powerful campaigns. And do you want me to just pass it on?
Sure.
To Julia?
Hi guys, I work with Joel at CCCA, so I won't speak of the organization, but my name is Julia. I'm also based in the Netherlands, although we are remote, so we're actually all over the world. The two of us have happened to be in the Netherlands. And I'm a Spanish lawyer heading the work on fossil fuels and mining.
Welcome, Julia.
You
can pass it on.
Yeah, I was trying to see, because I can only see people that have gone.
That is
pass it to Rachel.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah.
I think she said in the chat she wasn't able to connect, but
True, yeah.
Yeah, she had some audio problems.
there she is.
Okay.
She's introduced in the chat.
Yeah.
Well,
Rachel
hi,
from
Rachel. All right. I think that's everybody, right?
For the time being.
Yeah. All right.
We forgot Patricia. Or is Patricia part of the...
Patricia will be translating. She's actually on the Spanish channel, so only Spanish speakers can hear you, but we're doing recording especially for the Latin America. Yeah, of her translation.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. So just a little bit about us. I'm Evan Wanjiru, based in Kampala, Uganda. So I'm the co-founder and lead of Mighty Ally Institute. We are a nonprofit training institute working with early stage social ventures, specifically supporting them to grow their businesses through brand workshops, tools and coaching. So when we talk about growth, for us, it means growing income and growing impact because we work with social ventures. And our model of doing workshops, tools and coaching, we feel like workshops are not always enough. Like it's great to provide kind of like high level knowledge or info, introducing concepts, but we find like the implementation really comes in the one-on-one coaching. So we try and walk organizations through how they implement the learnings from the workshops. We also have a bunch of tools that we share that are actionable and usable that we also support the organizations to use. And then we use peer-to-peer model for organizations to learn from each other and network with each other so that, yeah, they can grow. And my co-host, Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Kevin Brown, co-founder of Mighty Ally. So I actually work mostly on the consulting side of our model. So we have two sides. There's the Mighty Ally Consultancy, that's a B corporation. And then we have the Nonprofit Training Institute that Evan runs. And what I feel makes our work powerful is that we're doing this consulting work day in and day out with social ventures around the world. So we've worked with about 100 organizations in 31 countries to do this brand building work. And it typically takes 4 to 8 to 12 months, depending on what they engage us for. And we're developing this expertise and the tools. And then we're scaling that expertise through these types of workshops and trainings. And so everything you hear us say today has been developed and proven in the real world. This is not just academic theory from a training standpoint. It's how do we take this work that we're doing on the ground and turn it into tools that others can take and run with. So that's the combination of the model. I'm here in South Africa. Before this, I lived in Uganda. And so American by birth. Good to meet you all.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So Kevin and I will be running this together, just so you don't hear it from one voice, mine. I will be looping him in to speak on certain parts. So why we're here, as we said, we support organizations in building, growing, right? Whether it's income, trying to generate more income, or increase your impact, you're facing that challenge. So most of the time, doing better in your marketing communications is the solution, or improving your marketing communications is the solution. But we found that that tends to be the symptom, and usually there's a lot more that's happening with organizations. So there's a deeper problem, and it's usually rooted in, especially for early stage, it's usually rooted in understanding what is it that you're doing, what is the problem you're trying to addressing, where do you belong in the space that you're in, and really articulating that, and then how do you then action that out and do your work well in order to then do your marketing communications better. So we created, through the consultancy arm, a proprietary framework called the 4A's framework. And this framework looks at brand holistically. So when we start introducing it, because we'll walk through the entire framework, you'll see that marketing communication is just a small piece of a bigger part of brand. So what we're going to cover in the 4A's, it's going to split them up in sections. So we'll start with ambition, approach, amplification, and alignment, and we'll just walk you through it. And then at the very end, we'll provide Q&A, a time for you to ask any further questions. I will say, though, you are welcome. We'll be doing a couple of exercises in each element as we go through. Please, you're welcome to speak up, put your hand up if you have a question at any point. I prefer it to be a dialogue and not a lecture at you. So anytime you have a question, yeah, put up your hand and we'll, or if you don't want to put up your hand and you want to put it in the chat, put it in and Kevin will address it if I'm speaking, and I'll address it if Kevin is speaking. Let this be a conversation, hopefully, even though we are introducing a very new concept to you. There will be a bit of talking. Let's dive in. Let's dive in. We're ready, right? All right. The way we look at brand and looking at brand holistically. So we call it the anatomy of a brand. A brand essentially is, it's inherent to your organization. Your organization is the brand is the organization. It's how you speak, how you think, how you feel. So for us, that's kind of like the anatomy aspect of it, right? It's like many big pieces put together make up the bigger part, just like a human being. So we like to just use the analogy of a human being. It's really in the DNA of what you do as an organization. And when you get that right internally, so it's inside out, you then project it out externally to the world and connect. And that's where your personality and your style and the spirit and purpose, all of that comes out. But that's once you have it really well organized internally. We hear a lot of times from, I mean, the common issues we hear are, we're really struggling with our messaging, or we're struggling with engagement on our digital channels, or we're struggling with engaging funders or partners, or our team are not aligned. Like we hear a lot of challenges organizations face, but a lot of the time it feels like it might be disconnected, but actually it's not. They're all symptoms of a much bigger problem, which is why our framework looks at it more holistically. So I want to walk you through that. We believe we need to start with the core of your brand, the foundation of who you are as an organization, which is the ambition. And this is really the theory of change or impact model, and we use that interchangeably. Then once, this is very much internal, right? Then once you look externally, which is the approach, it's how you're going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, because you're not alone. And you'll know from your peers here, you're all in climate change, etc. Like you're all in the same sector, potentially. Like you're not alone, there are many others in there. So how are you going to stand out? That's the approach. Then comes the amplification, the part we hear a lot of pain points about, which is around the marketing and communication. And finally, a piece that's usually missing and we believe is so important is the alignment, and that's internal to your organization. So it's your internal comms. Let me just put the words so you see it. It's your internal comms. It's making sure you're aligned on the goals. You all know where you're trying to go. And that's kind of like, that's your strategic plan. So that's how we view brand holistically. And what we're going to do today is walk you through each section of this so you have a better understanding. So starting with theory of change. Theory of change essentially is basically, and we use impact model interchangeably, as I said, it's basically just your organization articulating what is the problem you're trying to address, like what's the need, where you're trying to go, what are the results, what's the vision, what's the impact you want, and then how you as an organization are going to make that happen. That's essentially the theory of change. So it's making sure you're able to articulate and describe compellingly the change you want to see in the world and how you as an organization are going to make that happen. We have a blueprint or canvas that we've put together, the theory of change blueprint, that kind of helps you break apart into smaller sections to walk your organization through. And I want to walk you through this blueprint. And I'll use this analogy. I'll keep going back and forth with these to explain. So if you picture a mountain, at the bottom of the mountain is where you started. This is the reason. This is why you started your organization. This is the problem that you want to address, the people that you want to serve, which is the first column in this blueprint. So the need, it's the problem, the people, and then the reason why you started this in the first place. That's at the bottom of the mountain. Now you know where you need to go to the pinnacle of the mountain, which you want to climb this mountain. You want to reach the vision. You want to see this change in the world. This is the impact you want to have. That's at the very top, which is the results part of this model. So it looks at your vision. It looks at your 10-year target. It's looking at the outcomes. So like your impact indicators, your outputs, and then pathways is a complicated element, but it's generally around what kind of organization are you. Finally, knowing the need, the problem, the people you want to serve, knowing the change you want to have and the results is now the middle part, which is usually the missing middle in theory of change. This is now your organization. How are you going to climb up the hill? How are you going to reach your pinnacle? What is the work that you're going to do? This is essentially the solution. So that's that little man climbing up the mountain. So that covers the entire blueprint or theory of change. And you can see the pattern, knowing the problem, the need, the people you're serving, you know where you want to go. The middle part is the work that you do as an organization in how you're going to get there. So if you look at the parts that are highlighted, for example, the need, the conclusion is really like the reason. In terms of the work, the mission really concludes that element of it because it really describes what it is that you do. And then the vision concludes that part of the element because it really describes the change you want to see in the world or what you're trying to do as an organization. We believe that it is the first step in helping you drive income. And there are a couple of compelling reasons for this. The first thing is just having a clear reason and vision, or even just purpose, right? As organization, if you have a really strong, compelling purpose that's clear, internally, your team is motivated, right? You all know what you're working towards. Externally, as an organization, you're then able to get people on board to engage with you because people buy into purpose. People are emotional, they want to connect emotionally with the organization and what you're doing. That's number one. Number two, and this is very important, I think this is the one thing we always harp on around, is focus, 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 focus. The impact model helps you to narrow down and focus and put your stake down on, this is what we're going to focus on and do our work around. And when you have a really clear and concise, articulated mission, it helps you put all your resources around that. So your team is focused on that. As an organization, you're efficiently running systems, you're efficiently running. Everything is focused on that one issue, and you're not trying to do too many things. You're not stretched thin, etc. Number three rather, is it helps you with your fundraising. If you know who you're serving, you know where you're trying to go, the impact you want to have, it will really drive, you'll be clear on the targets you're trying to reach. It will really drive, who are the funders you need to engage, what are your fundraising goals, etc., and help you reach them. Finally, second to last is partnerships. A big, big, big important element in your work is who else can you work with to help you support the work that you're doing, so that you can create the impact that you want. And a big part of this is partnerships. So it really helps you attract the right partners, choose the right partners, and attract and engage them. And then finally, it's the first step to your marketing and communications, developing your marketing and communications. It guides your marketing and communications, essentially. You're very clear on what you do. You're very clear on the results that you want. It'll then, guide how you market and communicate the work that you do, right? How you articulate the work that you do. I wanted to quickly just to give you a heads up, when we do the theory of change, it's as you can see, it's quite intense. This is something that takes several workshops to do. So really here, we just want to present to you the concept, so you're aware of it, because we're walking you through the 4A framework, but it really is quite an intensive process. But I did want to pull out an element for us to do right now. I want you to think about your why and your what. Specifically, the reason you started to do this work, the original why behind your work, and then your mission. What is your solution? So outline your problem and then outline your solution. And you potentially already have this. You can put it in, I'll give you 2 minutes. Let me give you 2 minutes. And we'll do a group share. So I'll ask you all to share. I would love to hear from all of you. Let's start from.
Cool. So our problem is that 80% of campaigning organizations don't have access to the training and education they need to win their campaigns. And our solution, I'm not sure if this is the solution, but is to provide training, education, and organizing and continuous recruitment. But I'm not quite sure if that's the solution to those organizations.
Okay.
Kind of seems too simplistic, doesn't it?
I mean, it is the work that you do. Can you say the first one again, the problem?
80% of campaign organizations don't have access to the training and education they need to win campaigns. So I'm going to the micro, like there's actually a bigger problem, which is climate change.
Yeah, what's that bigger problem?
Okay, so the bigger problem is well, I guess it's that we need to stop the advancement of big coal into Asia if we're to keep our warming scenarios below or capped at 1.5 degrees. So these coal projects are in the pipeline. So we need to phase out coal as quickly as possible and move towards energy transition.
Because the coal is causing what problem?
Climate change in the kind of bigger sense, but it's emissions from the coal, from the coal industry at large. So
I think that's what we wanted to get to, like, what's that? I know it is macro, but what is that under the umbrella of climate change? So if it's for you, it's emissions, like, what is that problem? Because that's what you're interested in as an organization.
Yes.
And then the second part of who you're helping, you're actually starting to describe the people that you serve. Actually, when you're talking about the 80% of the company, that almost feels like the people you as an organization want to help. And then you came in with your solution of what you do to support them.
Okay.
The reason we try and go bigger in the problem, it has to be really compelling to almost like attack. It needs to connect with a lot of people, like, yes, okay, I see the ultimate like problem that you're trying to address, and then break it down into how you as an organization. Kevin, you want to add to that one before we move to?
Oh, I think you covered it. Yeah, and this is, you'll see later in the Marcom section that there's an art to, you have all these different pieces of your theory of change and which pieces do you pull out. And so I know we're going fast today, and I think most of you probably have it in there. And part of brand building and communications is figuring out which piece at which time to which audience do you talk about. And it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, okay, that's useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Julia and Joel, do you want to do it separately or?
What do you want to do, Joel?
I was going to say,
Julia,
your turn, Julia. You go first.
I had actually a bit of the same problem that then I saw happen with Alex, that I was like, well, like the big problem or like the small problem, or like which way do we like phrase it? So I actually sort of like phrased it from two different perspectives. So the first time I addressed the why was climate change is just not addressed as fast as is needed or with the force that is needed. And the what was, we already have legislation or avenues in place that could be used to tackle it, but they're just not, they're not used, they're underutilized. So that's what we want to activate, to use legislation that is already in place to tackle climate change. But then when I was trying to say like, well, that doesn't say how we are different from a different organization. So then I tried to like phrase it more from like a more internal or approach perspective. And then the way I phrased the why was that prosecutions and legal action often do not succeed because evidence is either not enough or because there's a lack of resources. And what we want to do is bridge the gap between those that have information and those that can act or enforce it, so that we basically think that there are a lot of people out there that have either information on the ground, like grassroots, or expertise, like scientists, or like us lawyers, and like it's sort of dispersed. So it doesn't reach the people that can actually act on that information. So we want to collect that information, make a case file, and then give it to the people that can actually act on it. So that's my sort of more, what is it exactly that we do to tackle the problem?
Evan, you're on mute. Yeah, and Julia, something we always talk about when describing a problem is the different levels, exactly what you just said. And, there are all these levels of all these problems. If you take Mighty Ally, for instance, like the problem we're solving is that most organizations can't bring in enough revenue to grow. And we could talk about the problems within the social ventures we serve. We could also talk about the beneficiary problems on the ground and the people that are suffering and lacking their basic human needs. We could talk about problems in the philanthropy community and not, funding the right organizations. I mean, there's so many levels, and it really is almost an art and a science of thinking about at which level do you describe the problem that you're solving.
Thanks, Kevin. Joel, do you want to add to Julia's or?
Yeah, before I do, a small disclaimer. I've cheated a little bit. I listened to what you and Alex talked about. Based on that, I made mine even better. And so I've sort of done mine outside of the time limit you got. Hopefully it's improved accordingly. So what I've got is 90% of the trees cut down in the Amazon is illegal or linked to illegal activities. laws that focus on preventing climate crimes like this are not being enforced, and this is hurting our planet and us. So that's what I had for step one. The what is we support local and international stakeholders by providing them with the evidence and legal strategies that they can't get access to on their own.
Yeah, that was clear. You took the notes.
And that was not version 1, by the way.
No, that was great. I actually don't have notes on that. Kevin, do you have notes on that? Yeah, it was good.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, I hope you see what we were getting to. Rachel, is your mic still down? If it is,
I have a voice now. Oh, okay.
Great.
All right. Am I echoing?
You are.
Shit. Oh, sorry.
You can type it if you want in the chat. And then we'll.
Am I still echoing?
No.
Is it
that's
better?
Good.
All right, good. Thank you, everybody, and sorry for, these technical difficulties. I forgot my laptop at the office. So, anyway, all right. I will address the problem that we are addressing, that next group is addressing at a big level. I would like to say. So the problem is that Korea's economy being quite emissions intensive. That's our problem, especially including the power and industry sectors. So how we address that problem is that we provide policy and strategic suggestions to policymakers and business executives how to move to a zero carbon economy. I am not so I'm not sure if this is the right approach to frame our mission statement, but our mission statement is accelerating Korea's zero carbon transition by providing policy recommendations to decision makers of the government and industry. So the target audience of ourselves is very targeted and very limited. It's a small, very focused group of people that we want to talk to and we want to convince. That's the story that we have.
Thanks for that. I think your mission was clear. The note I would give for your problem is maybe add a so what, like why does that matter element to it. Because you'd said, just say the sentence again.
The problem is Korea's economy is too emissions intensive, especially in the power and industry sectors.
Yeah, so my question would be, so what does that mean? Like, you just need to add an element to that to understand why it's a problem.
It definitely contributes to warming the global climate, global temperature, and also that that will give a huge impact on our economy, like physically and economically in the longer and medium term. So that's why we need to, evolve from the status quo. Would that be too vague? I don't know what to say.
Yeah, it's a hard one because it is a big macro problem.
All right.
Yeah, I guess I was missing more the hook. Like why is it a problem that emissions are high, or like what does that do in a shorter sentence? Just explain in a shorter sentence. I don't know if Kevin, you have a better way to articulate that.
Yeah, I think you covered it.
I just don't know what the answer is for you, Rachel. I'm trying to also think, how could you add to give you an example?
All right, then the narrative would get long. I will say that while in current Korean economy, there are a very small group of experts on zero carbon transitions in terms of research or technology or policy and industry. So the mainstream dialogue of decarbonization is very limited. It's not really advanced because most of the major mainstream experts and policymakers are for they have the background of oil and gas industry and also the electricity market structure in Korea is very monopolized, and there is little room for change because the central government state-owned company, electricity company, decides pretty much everything in terms of policy, the operation, so there is a very little room for discussion for change to march towards, like more distributed power and, like more renewable energy and more flexible operation of the grid. So we thought that we need a think tank that could provide like intellectual input to those to think about how to change the current power market structure to deal with, like, to better respond to approaching climate crisis for Korea. So that's I try to, add some details on to the problem that we have right now. And another problem that we are facing is that Korea's industrial structure is very energy intensive. Our economy has grown on the like manufacturing industries such as steel, like petrochemical industry, cement industry. So naturally, we in order to have our economy floating, that we have to emit a lot of carbons or greenhouse gases. So 80% of the nation's income comes from those industries. So it is structurally, it is really hard to start the discussion about decarbonizing the industrial operations because the stakes that the major industries have is just so high, and in nature their industry is just emissions intensive. In nature, they refuses to talk how to change or how to reduce, like the fossil fuel use or how to change their business portfolio. So we wanted to start discussions with our views, like the research findings that we have, to really start national discussions on how to decarbonize our industrial structure and the power market structure. So
yeah, I think something you mentioned, just as something to pull out, and back to why data points are so powerful. You said 80% of industries are focused around these manufacturing, like a high emission industries, right?
Right.
Yeah, so already that's 80% of industries are focused around this high emission. This is not sustainable in the long run because of whatever that because is. And then that you already have a sentence or a problem, like it's just a way to summarize. And then when people will ask you, okay, tell me more, then you can break out into all the other elements to describe it. Do you see where I'm going? We'll move on, but I just wanted to pull that out as an example for you.
All right. Okay. I will just try to refine the sentences. Thank you.
Super. Thanks. Okay. Another area I wanted to pull out from the model is closer to the vision. So we all have, I'm sure you have visions, and probably some of your visions are really grand. Some of the visions might not even be reachable in your lifetime, like they're so big, you're dealing with a really complex problem. So sometimes the big vision that's kind of like 30 or even 50 years down the line can be intimidating. So it's always good, even internally for an organization or externally with partners and funders, to have an intermediary goal, like just a really, it's still bold, it's still what we call big, hairy, audacious goal, something you're trying to achieve as a step towards reaching your vision. What is that goal? And it's usually one really big goal that you have, and it's time bound. So it's, and I want you to actually do this exercise. It's something that you should be able to measure, something you would be able to achieve in a period of time. So let's say 20 years. No, in fact, let me bring it closer. Let's say 10 years. So what would you say is like in 10 years time, like the one goal you want to reach as an organization on your way to reaching your vision? And if I show you the canvas again, just to see where this comes in, this is in the results section. I'm currently doing a small, getting us to talk about the 10-year target, your big, hairy, audacious goal that leads you to your bigger vision that you have. Somebody put up their hand, Alex.
Yeah, I guess with this question is, so, I mean, it seems like we are organizations that support the capacity of other organizations or communities at the front line. So, you know, our goal is around, you know, that capacity building piece for nonprofits and you know, community members. So which is a part, so building their capacity so that they can go and do this work and achieve these ends, these goals. So our big, hairy, audacious would be around, like in 10 years, we want to see, we want a network of thousands of organizers and activists across Asia using these tools, because that doesn't, you know, that in itself doesn't necessarily lead to the impact, right? But it's do you know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
And Alex, we've worked with a number of like intermediary type of organizations, and something we often see them do is have a BHAG or a 10-year target that mixes both who you're serving and who they're serving. So it could be something like within 10 years, serve 100 organizations that are serving 10,000 communities and 10 million people. You know, it could be like that type of statement that has three things mixed in to show that it's what you do and what they do all at once.
So let me give you 2 minutes. I know we're going kind of fast, but it's just to give you an idea of the work involved here. So 2 minutes starting now. Rachel, we ended with you. Let's start with you.
Okay, sure. I have two targets. First, our organization, Next Group, wants to break the current Korea's monopolistic power system to allow more players in the power market. And number two, Next Group wants to have the country's industrial emissions cut by 25% compared to the 2018 level. That's our 10-year targets.
Okay. The second one was clear. I didn't catch the first one. Please just repeat it.
We want to break the current Korea's monopolistic power system to allow more players in the power market.
Okay. What I would say there is, how will you know when you've done that? Which is why it's so important to put a number to that, or in some way make it measurable so that you can know when you've been successful or when you've achieved that.
Then
So
maybe the first one should be, maybe I could state the time that we are aiming for. Like, we want to break the current Korea's monopolistic power system by 2030 to allow more players in the power market. Would that suffice?
it was
It's
still-
really, really hard to hard to make it measurable. That's
but that's the
always
thing, it has to be, because you wouldn't know when
yeah.
you've achieved it. Otherwise you'll continue pushing the target.
I know, and as a research institute, it is always our headache to, you know, like make a measurable target statement, because we, you know, we do research. It's something that we don't see, we don't have progress in the short term, and it is really, really hard to put numbers on the research works. So for us, it was always like painful to make a really, you know, like concise and clear and measurable, achievable like statement to you know, like to talk to funders. So still struggling, but yeah, just wanted to share. Yeah.
Could you guys talk a bit more about measurable, because I'm also finding it really hard, but for a different reason, I think. I mean, we also have the problem that Rachel is mentioning, so like I think that's common for all of us. But another issue that we have, for example, is that our areas of work are very different, so it's very hard to find a way to put a number or some sort of measure that would show progress on both sides. So for example, like we work in deforestation and in mining and fossil fuels, right? So for deforestation, you could say something like acres where we've avoided deforestation, or it could be like number of cases that have been launched on the basis of the information that we've provided. Or like the common measure would be like emissions averted, but then like good luck measuring that. So it's, yeah, like I find that very difficult. And then for mining, for example, one of our biggest progress has been in a divestment, but it's not that all the work that we do for mining or fossil fuels is targeted towards divestment. So it's not either to say, in 10 years, we would have managed to get like 3 trillion divested from fossil fuels or something like that. Like that also doesn't work. So I'm finding it very hard to find something that can work for the organization as a whole and not just for one project.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is the thing we spend time trying to help organization break down, because as Rachel said, people want to know this, right? They want to understand, okay, how do you measure success? What is success to you? And you need to have some sort of measurement. And what is that? And usually it has to be closer to what your interventions are, which is why potentially if you're the intermediary, you'll have to have the 2-step, your intervention target, and then the ultimate target for the sector or area that you're in. But it can be, if I use ours as an example, and maybe Kevin, you have other examples of social enterprises you've worked with, but if I use us, because we would consider ourselves an intermediary as well, right? We support organizations with capacity building on brand. One way we could measure our 10-year target is to have 1,000 organizations have gone through our brand training, as an example. The ultimate of, have they grown? Are there more successful social enterprise brands? Is there more visibility around social enterprise brands? Is a joint effort. Like we alone can't do that. It requires the ecosystem to do that. So we'd have like a secondary target for that. But like what our intervention can be is that they utilize, or it can even be, we have 10,000 organizations that have utilized our tools for their branding or for their messaging, you know? It's just a way of showing closer to what we are actually doing. But yeah, I completely hear you on your challenge. Kevin, do you have an input on this one?
And another idea is, especially lately, a good 10-year target could relate to the 2030 SDGs, you know, finding just globally known targets, globally known measures, and just trying to rally around that. Yeah, measurable meaning that it's conceivably able to measure, not that you have to measure it. You know, so we just worked with a vision organization based out of UK, working around the world, and There's this global curve that shows that by 2050, 1.25 billion people, they could help avoid sight loss if they and everyone else in the industry, were combined. And so it's this big, crazy number of 1.25 billion, but it's conceivably measurable. And so we kind of rallied their 10-year target around that. So as long as it has something measurable, nobody is expecting you to actually have the monitoring and evaluation tools to go measure something this far in advance.
No, I realized, but I was more concerned of like, well, like the thing we could do is something like, I don't know, like make sure that like we are on track for like the 2030 reductions, and then it could be like either like methane or like carbon dioxide or whatever. But then there's actually no way to link anything that we do exactly to that, right? Like, I mean, at what point are you too vague? Like, is the purpose communication, in which case you can be vague, like more vague, and it's more of a, this is what we're working towards? Or is it more like it needs to be more tangible? It needs, because, if the question immediately arises on the person that reads, like, how are you going to do that? Like, like you can't measure that. So how is that your measurable aspect of your goal?
Right.
Like, you don't want people questioning what you're saying, right? So.
And the reality is sometimes, I mean, you potentially wouldn't even achieve this goal because it is quite bold. So you also have to keep that in mind. I think what you said in terms of more connected or directly connected to your work was the cases that have been taken up. I mean, that's connected.
That's one of the measures that we've used. Like, I think we find it easier to put sort of measurable aspects into like our projects when we like do an application or something, but that's more like for monitoring or to measure success of our specific programs. But that's why I was struggling to say, because then, for example, in fossil fuels and mining, it's not really about cases, whereas like in deforestation, it has been more focused on cases. So the fact that we actually have these two streams of work, also like these two thematic areas that may have different measurements, is also hard to, that's why I was like, how do I put two together for like the whole organization? Like, that's where I was also struggling. We don't really have the problem so much in the program system. Like when we talk to funders and we want to say, like, we are successful because we're gonna, like, we intend to launch at least one case on the basis of this information, and then perhaps when we report back, it's like we've actually launched 30 cases, because like first we are like piloting, so we're like we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So that's a bit easier because then those measures will be targeted for the specific action that we're proposing in that project. But then when it's organization-wide, that's where we struggle. How do we communicate, not like two silos or like, here's these two things that the organization does as if they are not connected, because they are, but it's difficult to communicate. How is it just one organization?
Yeah, I mean, but that is the challenge, and that's where we would push ordinarily, even in our one-on-one, we'd push you to get to, because as you mentioned, this is a communication tool, and a compelling one too, in terms of you want people to understand where you're trying to get to. Yeah, we're clearly not going to get to it today.
Yeah, no, of course.
But it's something, definitely, if it's brought in your mind, something to think about, please do be considering this. Is it okay? I'm just looking at time. I know not everybody has spoken. Can I move us along? And I'll try even out who gets to speak in the next sections. Thumbs up. Great. All right. I'm going to pass it on to Kevin to take us through a bit quickly the positioning strategy.
Yeah, we'll go fast and you'll get a copy of this afterwards. What I really want to do here is share a few tools and just a few methodologies to think about positioning. Positioning strategy is a big concept. It can take months and years. And in fact, it's never ending because the industry is always changing. The issues are always changing. The organizations in the space are always changing. And so it's both a document and a process that you're looking around at others, determining what makes you unique, deciding who you're targeting with your brand and your communications. And that might be very different than who you're targeting in the work. And then you're making promises to those audiences. And so this is called your approach. It's that second step of brand building. And I'll just show you a few tools here. This is actually a concept we borrowed from the Japanese concept of ikigai. And so it's this cool overlay of what you're good at, what others aren't doing, what the world needs, and what payers will support. When we say payers, that could be customers if you have a social enterprise model, but many times in this space, that's funders. And so if you can get that ideal overlap of these four pieces of the puzzle, that is really good, tight positioning. So we urge you to think about positioning in those terms. One way to get there is it starts with a SWOT analysis. A SWOT can be overused and cliche at times, but it's really important to look at what you're good at, what you're not good at, what the opportunities exist, and then threats in the market. Once you do that, that's one of the tools. You can also do a landscape analysis. And this is just, again, a quick hit of a look at a tool that you could use. Line up all the competitors across the top and then line up attributes along another side. And we know the word competitor can feel icky in this space because we're all doing good work together, but ultimately you are competing for time and attention and resources and funding. And so line up all the different climate organizations that might be competitive to you across the top, and then down the side, list out different attributes like where do they focus, what work do they do? There's so many ways to list that out, and then put X's or half X's or blanks. And this allows you to start looking for gaps and noise in the market. Again, this is kind of a process and a tool that takes some time, but start thinking about how do you line up against others like you. And then from there, once you have those two pieces of the puzzle in place, you can start thinking about the remaining elements of positioning strategy. And I think, let's see, it looks like Evan might be frozen. It says computer blacked out, restarting. So I'm just going to speak to it verbally. So actually, I can share my screen. One moment. So once you finish the landscape piece of the puzzle, you can then start thinking about your positioning strategy. So there are four elements of positioning strategy. We believe that first, you need to define what makes you unique. Next, you can think about the priority audiences, again, those that you are trying to reach with your brand or your communications. You can think about personas, so taking these priority audiences and digging into them much deeper, and then developing a few promises for them or value propositions. So I know this is a lot, but we're just meant to give you a taste of positioning, and then we can discuss it later if the time allows in a one-on-one setting. So there's a tool you might have used or seen called empathy mapping. This is where you take each of the audiences and try to get to know them much deeper. And so instead of just thinking, okay, we're trying to reach funders, you think much deeper. What type of funder? Is it a trust? Is it an institutional funder? Is it an individual donor? If it's an individual donor, is it someone giving £100 as a birthday gift, or is it £100,000 as a high net worth donor? What makes them tick? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And so using this type of tool to really get into the mind of your audience, and then even giving them a name, such as, let's call it Foundation Funder Franny. And you start thinking, okay, this communication is targeted at Franny, and this is what she's seeing and feeling and thinking. And so it just makes your communications much more tight versus just trying to scattershot to everyone. Once you get through that process, you can think about brand promises. You might also have heard of this referred to as like value propositions. This is a funny little graphic we use. It's meant to be a joke, but I think we've all seen that in the world of advertising. It might be a marketing agency thinking of an ad campaign for corn chips. And of course, they're salty and crunchy, and they're satiety, they fill you up. And then you can share these corn chips, and then sharing brings family, and then family brings happiness, and happiness brings world peace. And so you end up getting some commercial on TV about corn chips that are saving the world. And I know this is an exaggeration for the sake of emphasis, but you get the idea. Instead of just going out and telling people what your organization does functionally, you can really start thinking about those advantages and the benefits of your work. And that's where really brand and communications becomes so much more powerful. You're not just talking about what it does, you're talking about those outcomes and the results and the advantages and benefits. So I know that was pretty quick, but the final piece of this positioning puzzle that we like to show is this idea of brand personality. So there's a concept of brand characters. There are 12 brand characters that you can pick from, and there's a whole process you can go through, and you can decide which brand character are we. And so it's not just about what you're communicating, it's how you communicate and what's that feel around your brand and the colors and the fonts. And there's just so many different ways to differentiate, because there are a lot of organizations out there, but tapping into a unique brand character can really help differentiate your communications from everyone else. So I know that was fast, but we're going to do another little exercise around what makes you unique, because out of anything in positioning, if there's anything you remember, it's this. There are a lot of organizations, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of noise. And so figuring out what makes you unique compared to others is just the most critical part of positioning. And so we like to say, pick 3 things, and those 3 things have to be authentic, meaning it can't be made up. It has to be important to your audiences, and provable. Important meaning, you might be the only organization in Sweden that wears all green to the office on Fridays, but who cares? Your audiences don't care about that. So we're trying to think of things that are important to your audiences, and then provable. And if you can list those out and have 3 of them, that's a really core part of your positioning strategy. So let's take 2 minutes and then we'll do a little share out.
Let me call Joel and Rachel. So start with Joel.
Sorry, I was still writing. I was a little slow to just sort of germinate something. So I got the first one done. Hopefully it's authentic. CCCA is unique because we see the gap between local prosecutors, local communities, and NGOs who all want the same thing: to prevent climate crime. CCCA fills this gap because its lawyers and investigators can get access to the evidence that our stakeholders need. That's kind of where I sort of stopped typing and, sort of got to you. So that was kind of the path I was on.
Kevin, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's on the right path. I think it's maybe just, I think it would take Joel probably looking around at others in the space and saying, are you truly the only ones doing this piece? And also, the thing we didn't talk about is how when you name these 3, it should be bam, bam, bam. And so I think, we know you only had 2 minutes. And so as you think on these, how do you get it down into just a few words? And then the other factor that makes this exercise powerful is that there might be some organizations that say one of the things, and there might be others that maybe a few that say 2, but it's that magic combination of all 3 that's actually what's most unique. And so it's not like any single one has to be the perfect one, but it's that magic combination that when you weave them together and someone says, okay, well, what makes you unique? And you say, number 1, number 2, number 3, that power comes in from the combination.
After Rachel speaks, could you just elaborate a bit on the authentic and provable aspects? I find that hardest to wrap my head around, but perhaps Rachel's example may make it clearer.
Was that for us or for Joel?
Oh,
Sorry?
that was for Mighty Allies. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so authentic meaning just, it can't be made up. It needs to be that something that's already happening, or, that like some organizations will say, well, in the future, we want to be this. And it's like, that's not true to who you are today. And then the other thing is provable, meaning like there has to be some type of way to say whether or not it's true or false. So you might say, we're the best at this. And it's like, nobody can prove that. Nobody knows who's the best or not. And so it's just some level of kind of binary yes or no, is this true or false?
Rachel, you want to quickly share? Although I know you guys need more time on these.
Okay, sure. I'll go. All right. Next group is the country's only non-partisan independent think tank on net zero transition. And we provide policy recommendations based on modeling-based quantitative approach, which is not really often seen in the NGO area in the country. And also we have a good track record of deep policy engagement with the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Environment and the National Assembly.
Yeah, your first 2, although the second maybe you can even shorten. Your first 2 were great as boom, boom. The third one sounds more of a more like of your work of proving that you have relationships rather than what sets you necessarily apart. So maybe finding a way to reword that. But I like your first 2. They were quite clear.
How about we say, instead of the third point, how about we say, how about we like highlight the changes that we have made within the policy area in terms of, for example, we just helped the National Assembly to adopt the new legislative bills on RE 100 supporting mechanism and the power system. Like, so how about we highlight some like signature policy changes that we have drawn?
That would
Would
still be like talking about your impact or your results, right? Rather than, I feel like that part is more around your work is in close ties or deep relationships, like your relationship-based kind of thing, because that's what your organization does, or I would have to flesh it out, but it's more along those lines, not necessarily the result. It's more along like how, yeah.
Well, I'll think about that.
Okay.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you for the comment.
Thanks. But do you guys understand, just a thumbs up, do you understand where we're trying to get to with the importance of making sure you're able to articulate what's different about you, or what's unique about you?
Thumbs up.
All right. Let's quickly jump on marketing and communications. So this is a part that people are always excited about because that's the pain point that they see. So what I was talking about, the iceberg, it's the top of the iceberg. It's the pain, it's what organizations come to us with the challenges that they have. It's usually around marketing and communications. But really, Marcom is basically about how you now articulate your work. You've seen the work that you need to do, the foundation that you need to build through the impact model, the theory of change, through the positioning. Like once you have that and it's really solid, you're then able to be guided in how you now tell your story and how you communicate what you do, and you can do it compellingly. And the idea here is you're able to turn the priority audiences that you've chosen into supporters, customers, into advocates, whatever it is. And what our model or framework does is make sure you start from the inside out. So this is why we really say start from the inside, start from your core, really understand what you're trying to do and how you're going to position yourself, because then it will naturally come out more compellingly. It'll be when you're communicating, you're really communicating from your core, and it's not like superficial elements that you're creating. Again, think of the iceberg. Marketing and comms is the top and usually what the symptoms are, but really the heavy work is the theory of change and the positioning work that you've done. What I want to walk you through very quickly is the 4 elements that we address under marketing and communication: the visual identity, messaging, channels, and partnerships. We all know visual identity. I think when you think of brand, you think of the visual identity, you think of the logo, your website, marketing materials, all of that. That's visual identity. Messaging platform is now more around, and this is where the impact model really helps you. It's now more around how you, as an organization, the guide, it's like a brand guide, but more developed, like more in-depth in terms of the comms and key messaging that you have in here, that now guides your entire team. So you're speaking cohesively in one voice to the world. So elements of the messaging platforms are your vision and mission are there, your unique selling propositions are there, basic descriptions of the products or services you offer are there, core impact metrics, top organizational statistics are there. Your tone of voice is there, so you know how you will speak and communicate. You know how you see companies like, oh, you sound friendly or you sound warm. These all come from having a guideline in how you'll communicate. And then your elevator pitch, and elevator pitch can come in many levels. I wanted to show you closely here, but like when you talk who we are, that's your elevator pitch, like boom, can you explain who you are really quickly? And that's what I wanted to pull out from the messaging platform. So as you can see, this takes a lot of time because we walk through organizations through this whole process. But I wanted to just pull out elevator pitch. You've already done some of that work in the exercises we did with the impact model, but at a high level, the elevator pitch is basically you articulating your theory of change. You're able to basically, in 60 seconds, help somebody understand what is the problem you're solving, where you're trying to go, or trying to achieve, and how you're going to get there as an organization. Boom. It's usually used verbally. You'll hear it usually a lot in like pitch or talking to funders, etc. But it's actually also important in your comms. So it can be, you know, if you're going to speak at an event, people ask for a quick profile, give them this really quick elevator pitch. So it can be used in many elements, your LinkedIn bio, etc. So using Mighty Ally as a sample, only 1 in 1,000 social ventures will ever grow beyond a small business. Even with impactful products and programs, most can't bring enough revenue to scale. That's the problem, or the reason. We guide nonprofits and social enterprises to position their brands, clarify messaging, and reach new audiences. The mission, the how. So they drive more income from funders and customers in a sustainable way. The payoff or the end result that we want. But you see, like, there's clearly a framework, but when you say it, it's succinct. I can never say that word. It's brief, simple, direct, and you can say it in 60 seconds. I'm gonna give one person randomly to share their elevator pitch. Maybe Julia, you haven't spoken in the last one. Not that you know in advance, but if you all can do it, what's your elevator pitch? Like, can you put these elements together? And you started to already put this together. Remember in the impact model, just to see that how it is rooted in the core of what you do. So what's the need or problem you're trying to solve? What's your mission? And then the payoff. Just the first tab, don't worry, we won't over dissect it.
The biggest challenge we find in this exercise, and the science of human psychology shows, people actually will listen to you and try to translate what that means to them. And it dates back to being cave women, cavemen, and when we're wired to either thrive or survive. And so many organizations fall into the trap of talking about themselves first. And what you're trying to do is actually talk about the problem first, not yourself. And so if someone says, tell us about your organization, don't talk about yourself first, talk about the problem in a way that gets that listener to thrive or survive. So again, you don't start with your mission, you start with, okay, what's this big problem that listener cares about? Once they get interested, then tell them about what you do. And then you end it with that payoff so that they can see where it's going.
Giving you 1 minute, Julia. Drum roll.
Okay. So it would be something like there are thousands of organizations and citizens that want to take action on climate change. They work hard at collecting this information, but it often fails to trigger action. CCCA uses its law enforcement expertise to bridge the gap between those that have the information and those that can act on it. I guess I would need a payoff.
Oh, payoff. Yeah. No, that was great. You're just missing the payoff for, yeah.
I think it'd be something along the lines of if we enforce the laws we already have, we're halfway there to solving the problem or something like that. Like a lot of organizations focus on changing policy, and that is extremely important. But that means that you're doing a lot of work until you get a new framework, and then that can be applied to the real world. So what we want to do is, like, while other people work on getting that done, which is very important, we can already address a big part of the problem or do a lot more with what we already have.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track with that.
I think it would be something along those lines.
Guys, let's give snaps to Julia, who's put on the spot. All right, let me move us along very, very quickly. Channels are just another important part of marketing and communications. So it's really figuring out, where do you want your brand to articulate itself, to present itself to the world? What are you going to choose? And it's really important. Oh, sorry, I'll just skip that really quickly. There are many, many channels. Like, we're oversaturated with channels and information that's out there. So again, I hope you're seeing the connection. If you understand your positioning, if you understand your priority audiences, you can now focus on, where are they? Where's the best place to reach them? And then you put all your energies there instead of trying to be all over the place and competing in this loud noise that's there. How do you select channels? I mean, a big part of it is look at who you aspire to be, or your potential competitors or organizations that you think are reaching the audiences that you're reaching, and you want to reach them too. Look where they're at, what channels are they using, and utilize those. Use data, so Google Analytics, all of that, like follow the data to see where people are going to and are being directed to. And then make sure you're always monitoring. So set goals and then measure them and monitor. It's honestly like a process of back and forth. You're just continuously checking which is the best channel to meet, to reach the audiences that are a priority to you. And that's the most important part. Where are they? And you'll keep moving. If you have to move to, if they switch to somewhere else, you'll move to those channels that they're at. What we challenge, especially for early stage organizations, is don't spread yourself thin. Pick two at most, of which one is a priority and the other is secondary. And then really focus on putting your energies in there and making that work. You'll then start to figure out, what are people attracted to in terms of the audiences you're trying to address. And then you can start tweaking accordingly. Then as you grow, you can begin opening it up, but really try and narrow down on two channels. For example, Mighty Ally, I think the main channel is newsletter. So it's the platform is content marketing through a newsletter that's also on the website. And then the secondary is pushing it through LinkedIn, for example, and just focus on that. And we follow the analytics and I'm constantly measuring that. I won't do this exercise, but it's really just important that you prioritize your channels. Lastly, there is a marketing plan template that we have. I'll share a link later, or Anna will share it, that you can download a bunch of these resources. So we do have a simple marketing plan tool that you can use that also follows the process that we're talking about. So you can see you're pulling a lot of stuff from your impact model, your positioning into your messaging. What I wanted to cover, and something that potentially intimidates organizations, social organizations, is corporate partnerships. And just reminding you, they're creative ways to have partnerships with corporate brands. It's not that a lot of the time it's like you're an organization begging them for money or begging them for their CSR, but there are other ways to work with them. You could work with their people. So like they could volunteer their skills and expertise, for example. You could use their product and then promote that you're using their product, right? You could, on your platforms, you could show that, oh, we're working with brand X. And for them, it's almost like now the CSR element, that they're tied into an organization that's doing good and helps them to also promote their do good side of things. And then the philanthropy is the easier one of, if they have the money and want to give the money, take it. But there are a number of corporate brands out there that really are hungry. A lot of organizations are starting to have a lot more CSR and are hungry to work with social enterprises. So find them and be creative. What you need to look for is, what is the shared value? So it's an even power balance. It's not them owning you. You do have leverage. Just know you have leverage. It's now how you creatively approach them. All right. Last element is the strategic planning. And I'm just going to stick on this screen, but Kevin will walk us through really quickly.
Yeah, I know we're 3 minutes left, so this will just be a quick overview and then you can get a copy of this presentation. But the reason we think this is the fourth step of building a brand is because organizations are notorious for telling the world about a big vision and raising money and funding, and they're out there telling the world about what they're doing with their vision or their 10-year target, but they're actually not bringing it down to earth internally inside the organization. And we've heard over and over again from funders that say the main reason we don't fund an organization is that we don't believe they can pull off what they're saying. And so you've got this communications engine that's telling the world, and then you're not actually doing it internally. And so we believe strategic planning is the way that you bring your vision down to earth into action. And so from your ambition all the way to alignment, you can see in this little flow that you've got your vision, that comes down to earth with your 10-year target. From there, you start to visualize, what does this look like in 3 years? Then you develop your annual goals. From your annual goals, you establish your quarterly priorities or rocks. And even from your quarterly rocks, you get into a weekly scorecard. And so the joke is, we ask our clients, do you know what you should be doing today and this week in order to reach your vision? And if you don't, then you're missing a big piece of that strategic planning process, because you and your team should know, hey, the vision is way out there and it might take a lifetime, but I know what we should do internally this week in order to pull it off. And that kind of internal alignment is such power for not only your team to feel like that they're clear, but also for funders to believe what you're saying in the world.
Julia.
I have a question regarding the vision statement. Something that has sort of come up for me throughout the whole presentation actually is that I think we kind of have two visions. I think one is for what we want the organization to become, or who we want to, where do we want to end up as an organization. And then we have like the vision of like what we want to achieve through the substantive work of the organization, if that makes sense. So like the second one, what we want to achieve through the organization is more like, we want to fight climate change, we want to reduce emissions, we want to avert disaster. This is where it's it. But I think we also have a goal for the organization itself, like who do we want to become in the ecosystem of organizations that work on climate. So I'm not sure how to articulate those two, or would it just be different messaging? Like one would be sort of maybe more internal or for funders when you're asking for money, and the other one would be more of like your website to the world. This is the problem that we're trying to solve. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, if I just made it messier.
Yeah, a very quick answer. By the way, Kevin has a hard stop, so he might pop out. A very quick answer for that is actually, one sounds like positioning. So it'll be in how you're communicating yourself in terms of how you want to position yourself in the sector, what kind of organization you want to be in the sector. That's all around their positioning and communicating, and then where you fit in. The work, so what you're trying to achieve as an organization, is now that vision statement. And that's where you'd create the strategic plan. But internally have a plan for, we want to be known as this, we want whatever those are. That's now going to be part of how it's almost like the culture you build as an organization and how you present yourself. All right. I know, sorry, we're not going to do these exercises because we're out of time. But that was the overall framework. You can imagine it's a lot of work. It's actually broken down in step-by-step on our website, the Mighty Ally website. So this will be shared with you, so you can go there. And there's a lot of tools you can download there as well. I don't know if there's any in this small time. I don't know, Anna, if we have a minute, if anybody has a question. Anna, do we have?
Yes, 1 minute, yes, maybe if we have questions. Although it was very interactive and a lot of questions were asked already. But if there is something, please go ahead.
You can always, I guess, contact Anna if you have bigger questions for us. And yes. I know Alex, for example, wanted to have a one-on-one, but yeah, actually not only Alex, already quite a few. I'll follow up with Evan. But yes, in principle, feel free to book a call through me or directly, and we will share the handouts and to have individual sessions also with Evan, because it's a very rich and dense presentation, and there are lots of things which I'm sure you will wish to explore in detail. So just, I'm sure there will be lots of follow-up. Yeah, but if right now no more questions, then really, really big thank you to both Evan and Kevin, and a round of applause. And thank you so much also to the participants for your engaging discussions. And we look forward to seeing you in the next sessions. All the best, guys. You're doing great work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks.